Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews Saturday Conversation Show, an interview series where I talk to entertainment personalities, content creators, and filmmakers about their work and love of film. Today's guest is FC Rabbath, a filmmaker and commercial director who also has dabbled as an inventor, author, comedian, a former journalist, and also as an entrepreneur. With a number of short films and features to his name, the always prolific FC Rabbath has two new projects releasing soon in the Final Pact and the new arc, which you'll be able to see next year. And it's a pleasure to always have FC Rabbath on the show. We've talked before about waiting. We've talked about a monster. Is it was it a monster calls or a monster
Oh, a
lives?
brilliant monster. A
A
brilliant
brilliant
monster.
monster. Yeah, that was the first one we talked about way back. I think back in 2018 or something, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken,
yeah.
that film came out.
That-
It's going to be great now to go dive deeper into everything your life, FC. How have you been?
Been good, been good, been keeping busy, trying to get out the best productions out there, and always great to talk to great critics like you. You're one of my favorite critics, actually.
Well, thank you very much for that. And it's always great to be able to talk with UFC because ever since you got in touch with me all the way back then 2018, um, yeah, just been really awesome just watching your films and watching your content. But it's really interesting this time. Been diving into kind of like your background and such, and from what I can find in my research, it's going to be a really interesting kind of a fact-finding mission for me. I could get it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, about what's true on the internet, what isn't. So I think I'm going to start off with born in Egypt in 1986. Is this correct?
19, yeah, I was born in Egypt. Yeah, my dad's work had us moving everywhere. My sister was born in Saudi Arabia, so basically we were just being born where my was working, essentially.
So when you're moving around the way you work with your dad's career and such, how does kind of shape you as an individual, but also as kind of like an artist, as a filmmaker? Does those moments, those memories, those early years in your life, do you look at your work now and think, if I didn't have those experiences, maybe the work I'm putting out now wouldn't be as, I don't know, as unique as they are to you now, as opposed to if you just were just in the one place and you're embedded within the one country for all your life?
Well, so I'll just start from the beginning, essentially. I was born in Egypt, but I lived in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and other places. But in I was only in Egypt for like I was like not even I couldn't even remember it because I was only like born. But I made my first movie in Saudi Arabia when I was like
Mm,
9 years old, and it's the only
mm.
country in the world where there were no movie theaters allowed. It was illegal. So it was funny to start my career there. Let's put it that way. But yes, it definitely did affect me. Uh, truth be told, I am not making the films I want to make because I don't have the budget. I want to make much bigger pieces, period
Hmm.
pieces, and political, like things about like history. Just but the thing is, they're all very expensive. So
Right.
I'm trying to just do what I can do right now, and but that's sort of where I'm at. But yes, they definitely have affected. I've been to so many countries. I've been to over, I don't even know, maybe 55 plus, something like that. I've met so many people, and it really does affect you because, you know, even the music and the cultures, you get such a rich experience that you can really pick and choose what you like and put something together.
Um, you make your first film when you're 9, but you're in a country at that time that was very restrictive in a way cinema can be watched. I mean, there was no theaters at all. You just said, how did you watch films at that time? What was it? What was your avenue into watching movies, and what movies were available for you to watch at that time?
So there really wasn't any movies. So we were in something called a compound, and it was basically where all the foreign kids lived together. It's like basically a little suburbia oasis in Saudi Arabia where we were with the Canadian kids and the Australian kids. Like basically all the Westerners were in this compound.
Hmm.
And basically there was no entertainment. So I started making puppet shows for the kids, and it was exhausting to entertain everybody. So I started filming it, and my movies were like sort of the entertainment to watch because the only thing that was on TV was like recipes for eggplant and weird stuff like that. And essentially that was going on. It's actually funny because it just recently, I think in the last 5 years, Saudi Arabia finally allowed movie theaters there. So it's a
Hmm.
very recent thing. Yeah. So
Um, what were your earliest memories then of actually attending a cinema? Was that until you got to the States, or did you manage to
yeah,
do that beforehand?
yeah. So occasionally my dad would be able to take us in the summers. Not every summer, but occasionally he'd take us back to Florida and
Hmm.
New York, where my family was. And yeah, basically I got to see. I remember my first experience was actually The Lion King. I got to see
Oh,
that, and it was I absolutely loved it. I loved the movie going experience. It was very fun, and I got to slowly upgrade from puppets to people in my movies,
mm.
and that's how it started.
Lion King, that would be a great first movie to watch in the cinemas. How old would you have been? So that was 94, I think that came out. So you would have been around, see, you're born 86, around 8 years old, 8, 9 years old. Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. I thought it was 95. Maybe it was 95, but something like that. Yeah,
Hmm. Awesome.
yeah.
Um, okay, so when you finally moved to the States, I think it was like 2000, was it 2003 that you moved to the
Yep,
US? Is
exactly. It
that
was
correct?
because of the Iraq War,
Mm-hmm.
and it was essentially we were in Kuwait at that time, and they evacuated everyone except my dad stayed back, and he actually stayed there for a few more years while we came to Florida, and I just basically continued my high school education here. I arrived at like the end of 10th grade. It was just very unexpected. Yeah.
When you're in the US and you're starting this new life and you're in this place where there's all kinds of avenues you can go down, all types of careers you can do. It seemed to me that like you dabbled into a lot of different kind of things. So I just mentioned in the intro in itself, on top of being a filmmaker, commercial director, there's inventor, author, comedian, former journalist for the AP, your entrepreneur. What, when it comes to these kind of like different things, was that you? Is this you just kind of like just seeking out different avenues, seeking out different things? Trying out different career opportunities because now you're in a place where in the US where that stuff was available to you. How did that all kind of come about? That you've just kind of jumped in all these different kind of professions and different kind of creatives. It's really fascinating to me.
Well, it was sort of I always liked to do engineering and creating things, but essentially what happened is after I graduated from university, which was around 2008, 2009-ish, is when the economy crashed, if you
Mm,
remember, and there were
yeah.
just really no jobs. So I essentially just did a bunch of everything and was forced to do a bunch of everything and at the same time keep up my filmmaking because I just really enjoyed it, even though I was technically terrible at it for years. I was, and but I just kept going at it. And to be honest, I never had the. There's some people who can pick up a camera and make a movie, and I'm just amazed at how they could just understand everything so quickly. I did not have
Mm,
that talent. Everything that I got better in, it was trial and error and a lot of failures to get to, And because
yeah.
I'm a very math based mind. I wouldn't even say it's funny because like when you meet an artist type person, they're an artist. I'm not really an artist type person, and it was just interesting to venture into that, and I like to approach everything in a math style. If that makes sense.
Can you speak to me about some of the things you did as an inventor? Are we talking about stuff in reference to like filmmaking? Is that kind of stuff where you kind of worked on in regards to inventions? I mean, you talked about just then that it's very much a hands-on kind of practical way you kind of developed your filmmaking style. Does the invention part of that come into it as well?
In some ways, yes, I have also done something like that, but I also invented a smart traffic light, which I can send you if you'd like to see some material on it. And I patented that, and I also created a special sticker for medicine caps that it changes color when you touch it with your hand. So if you
Okay.
don't remember if you took your medicine, you could see that there's still a heat signature. It's like just a cheap sticker way in case it's supposed to help people from overdosing or underdosing, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And so I like to do little things like that and invent, and that just sort of like my I like to call it in a way I feel like film is my mistress and inventions is sort of like my the thing I mostly do when I'm not filming, which is about I'd say about 50% of my time.
How many patents do you have now? Do you know?
So I share two. and I've done 3 on my own.
Interesting. Very cool. Very
Mhm.
cool. And as an author, I was just I'm looking around to see, what FC Rabbath books are. The things I kind of come across is like children's books,
Yes,
A Frog's
so
Card, The Little Flower. Is that you?
yep, yep.
Oh,
Yeah, those
wow.
are so remember when I told you I was in the Middle East and I didn't the kids were bored? I actually
Hmm.
wrote those long ago and they just got published and they're still being distributed as we speak. And it was just like someone said, "Oh, you should totally try publishing it because it was cool," and so that's what happened. And even though yeah, it was published in 2011, but I had written them a long time ago, and so there's that. But I also published. I have 3 novels coming out as well, which
Well,
I'm
awesome.
yeah. So that's I got 2 done and one I'm working on. But the issue is trying to publish them with the right publisher.
Do you find publishing a book is similar in a way of trying to find distribution for a movie? Is the two worlds kind of very kind of just parallel there in regards to getting your work out there in these two different industries?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, very alike. But I feel like with I can't believe I'm saying this. I actually think it's harder to publish a book
Hmm.
because it takes time for someone to sit down and read it.
Right.
And uh, and this is gonna sound weird, but people are lazy and they don't really want to read it. And it's hard to get someone to take it seriously enough, as opposed to sitting down and pressing play. And
Mm.
so it is harder, and a lot of times you end up just self-publishing, which I'm trying to avoid at all costs because with self-publishing, yeah, it's good, but it also has its severe limitations, and no one's pushing your book, and you know, I hope that makes sense.
It does, yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It does. It definitely makes sense for sure. And I think,
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's a kind of like a stigma on someone who might do a self-publish, as in there's some type of lack of quality control there or something like that. So I can kind of understand where you want to go down the road of going to more traditional road of getting your book out. Because I've been trying to dabble with some, trying to do some writing a book about some myself. So it's really something that's kind of fascinating to me at the moment. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but who knows. Um, I gotta ask. I got two boys. My oldest is 12, youngest is 9. My oldest son, Michael, he's starting to express a really healthy, keen interest in making his own movies. So when you talk about when you were a child making these puppet shows and you grabbed your dad's camera and you're making this stuff, he grabs this little digital camera that I have. He gets his Godzilla toys. He loves Godzilla. He loves all that stuff. It's nuts. This is how much he loves it, and he makes his own movies out of it. And then he records it and he shows them to me, and then we go on, my little editing suite and we edit the stuff and all that. Um, how important do you think it is for kids to be able to express themselves in that kind of way, in a creative way, to not only, just the standard, draw something or, color a picture, but, dabble in some stuff, make a film or do a stage play or stuff like that. I'm curious from your regards because, you did it when you were a kid and now here you are, you're an independent filmmaker and very prolific in that way. And I'm just kind of curious on what your take is on that.
I feel like with kids, and this is something I keep telling myself, is I have to remind myself to still be a kid when I make a movie because it's all pretend, right? You're kind
Right.
of still a kid. I feel like movies are silly, like because you're like standing in front of a green screen, you're pretending something's there, and it really is. It's a fascinating way to continue your childhood in a way, you know. And my only advice I'd say for like anyone who is a kid who's making films is I think to have them try to problem solve situations. Like, for example,
Mm.
obviously it's not going to happen with it's a kid right now, but like, let's say your actor drops out, can't do it. You got to problem solve. And I think that's really good for a kid to have some kind of experience problem solving, and that will really test if they actually like to do it. Because I keep saying this is the film is kind of like it's kind of a monster, actually. That's my
Mm.
brilliant monster because it requires so much from you, and a lot of people think it's easy and fun, And while there can be fun moments, it can be very draining. So I think that's a really good way to gauge how much they like something, is to see how they do that. But I'd say, yeah, encourage them and let them play along. And it's actually way easier now with technology. Like, back in my day, I was editing between two VCRs, So
Right, yeah. No,
so
yeah, the good old
yeah.
days, all the different wires and bulky devices and all that. Yeah, you gotta.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's so primitive looking back at it now, but there was a charm to it as well. I think that's kind of missing these days.
Yeah, and I my dream camera back then was something called a Canon XL1. I don't know if you remember that camera, but basically I saw footage of it recently, and I'm just like, my goodness, it's terrible. Like even an iPhone is 10 times better now, and I'm just like, I remember dreaming of this camera. So it's funny how time changes everything.
FC, I want to move on to a game I like to play with
Hmm.
all of my guests. This game is called Choose Between Two. So I'm going to give you a choice between two options, and you're going to give me your answer, and you're going to just embellish as to why. Are you ready to play?
Let's do it.
All right, first one. Steven Spielberg or James Cameron?
Steven Spielberg.
Ah, that was a very quick one right there. It was about Spielberg's films that speak to you. And do you remember the first time you saw a Spielberg film as well?
Yes, it was Hook. And
Okay.
what I like about Steven Spielberg is he has moments of genius, and he also found a way to make films. I don't know how to put this, but he's kind of like a well balanced diet. Like everything
Mm,
is sort of just well balanced. Like he just knows how to make something mainstream, but also make it interesting enough that the independent minds would like it. And I'm talking about his earlier works here. I just like, to me, Jurassic Park is a almost perfect movie.
mm.
So I would say that. Now James Cameron is very good as well. I'm not taking away from him. It's just that I feel that Steven Spielberg sort of has a really good balance between great acting and great moments. And I'll always remember that one scene in Hook where I don't remember the character's name, but he was looking at Robin Williams' character and says, "There you are, Peter." I thought that
Mm.
moment, like that's some really great directing, and that's some old-fashioned directing when other directors rely on CGI so much and all this stuff, and I thought it was very clever.
When it comes to James Cameron, it's really interesting to me about how well this is just me talking here though. Like I'm kind of disappointed in him in that he just takes so incredibly long in between projects. Um, and you got like directors like Spielberg, Scorsese, Ridley Scott just pumping out like, a film every 2 years or so, whereas James Cameron can take anywhere to 5, 10 years to make something. Do you think that kind of hurts his legacy at all in regards to the lack of, you know, um, films that have come out, especially like since Avatar? Because what has he done since then? Just the second Avatar sequel, right? Or do you think that is just says more about him as a filmmaker and that he's not only making films, but he's like creating, as you as an inventor would appreciate this, he's like creating cameras and creating technologies and stuff to get these films to the screen. I'm really curious about what your take is in regards to James Cameron of productivity versus being prolific. It's a really interesting
No,
kind of debate, I think.
yeah, I mean, I understand it completely because the fact is, he's not. I keep saying this, like, for example, okay, I don't know how to put it in a delicate way, but like a lot of filmmakers create for the sake of creating, and I can
Mm,
appreciate the fact that he creates when he feels it's time. Actually, I almost feel that directing shouldn't be your only job. I think you
right.
should do something else to live life and still be connected. Like, I'm sorry to say this, and I love Ridley Scott, for example, but
Mm,
after seeing Napoleon and Gladiator 2, I felt like he needs to uh like live life more and
mm,
and and get reconnected, because a lot of times when you're just creating to create, you kind of get numb. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but it's like in a way filmmaking is kind of like it's like only come when you have something to say. and don't
Right.
just say something.
Mm,
And a lot of times that's something that gets lost. And it happens to all good directors. Like, I feel that way about M. Night Shyamalan. I think Shyamalan's earlier works were amazing, and then
mm,
I feel like he didn't really have anything to say, and it just sort of, we got some films that I'm like, okay, this is how is this the same director from, you know what I mean? And and it just sort of, so I feel like for myself, I would need to take a break sometimes, because I think that if I just create to create, it's just going to be a bunch of the old stuff or stuff that I don't feel strongly about.
right. Yeah. Um, so you're watching the movie. Would you rather see practical effects or CGI?
Practical.
And I know you work with a lot of practical as well. And it's interesting. I was just talking to just before our interview, I was talking to the Stephen Miller, who's the director of Werewolves, and it's a Frank Grillo film that's coming out. Well, he's out now in cinemas. So we'll talk about practical effects because that thing's got like practical creature effects and such. And it's just we'll just talk about how it just seems to me that I think a lot of people now kind of gravitate to that stuff more than they have in some time because there's just such a tangible quality to it, right? I mean, even so, the Jaws in Shark looks fake. At least you know that Jaws in Shark was in the water with the actors, and is that says something? Is that how you kind of feel about it?
Yeah, and plus CGI, even if it's really good, there's something very plastic about it that it doesn't
Mm,
really, there's something off about it, and it's like it's very seldom that I'm like, there it is. I mean, going back to Steven Spielberg, where he did the wide shots CGI and the close-ups not CGI, and that was really smart because, that's where the details lie, so
yeah.
if I feel like it practical, there is something about it that just has more realism to it because it is real. And CGI, I feel like should be reserved for more landscaping, more wide, because just to complete the picture, it shouldn't be the full picture. And I think a conglomerate of both is a good idea.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Physical media or streaming?
I mean, both are important. It's hard for me to pick one, but I mean, I guess I would have to, if I had to pick one, I'd say physical, only because it's like, it doesn't matter if you're not connected. It's like, let's say it's a world apocalypse, you've still got your movies you could watch anytime, Uh,
Right.
but but there is such a benefit to streaming that it's like it's hard to ignore, and I just don't. I think they're both important equally in a way.
Last one. You go to the cinema, what's your go-to snack? Popcorn or candy?
Whew, I'm gonna have to say popcorn. Yeah,
How do
yeah.
you like your popcorn? More butter, more salt?
Actually, right, just a little bit of butter, but no extra salt. I think that's good enough.
I'm gonna go. I usually say candy, but that's because I've been spoiled because I go to screenings and I get free popcorn, and I think I've just been kind of popcorned out. So I'm gonna stick up for candy there, but only because I've been been munching on free popcorn probably from the bottom of the barrel as well for us film critics. Um, when you work on your shorts, and then your shorts have been so prolific, like all the way from like 2006 up to your first feature with Brilliant Monster in 2018. You got a number of shorts here in just on your filmography. Um, you were saying before about how you're the type of person, the type of filmmaker that you learn by doing. Um, what is it when you work on shorts that you think you have learned that you still use to this day in regards to your feature filmmaking? Are there lessons you've learned in regards
Oh yeah.
to, I don't know, dealing with actors and such that have been incredibly beneficial to you with these making these kind of short films?
Yes, definitely. In fact, I think short films are a great place to make all your mistakes early
Mm,
on. Because the thing about features is so many things are invested in it that you really can't afford to make too many mistakes. And with short films, you don't all most of the time you don't have an investor. You can make all the mistakes, and you can not just make the mistake, but you can have a quick review and reflect on why it went wrong. I would say treating the actors is the biggest thing I learned, because when I was younger, again, as a math, analytical person, I that was the hardest thing for me was I just couldn't understand um the way actors think. I couldn't really understand. Like I'm like, just do it, like just act. It's not a big deal.
Mm.
I didn't really think about it. But then, as I learned from my short films and the mistakes I made, I was like, you know what? Like I totally get it now. I totally get why they have to have their own green room. I totally get why, because that's when you get the best performance, when they have time to work on it. Because just because you don't see them working out their acting muscle doesn't mean it's not there. And that's something that I learned. I mean, the short films, they taught me everything. Like it was mistake after mistake, and then you finally see, oh, okay, that's why it's there. So in a way, when you're younger and you're starting out, you're like, oh, I'm not going to do it the way Hollywood does. But now you know why they do it that way. As you kind of run into the same problem. You're like, oh, now that makes sense.
I'm just trying to figure out timeline wise in regards to technology. When you started doing your shorts, was digital cameras, digital technology something that was accessible then, or was this still on film that you've been recording on?
No, I haven't actually never shot on film before, but it was basically I forgot the name, but it's like those little mini, it wasn't mini DV, but it was
Yeah,
the one before it. It
yeah,
was
yeah.
there was the bigger version one, and then I started doing mini DV, and then went into the DSLR age.
When you work on your shorts, was there a project that you were working on where you kind of felt to yourself, you know what, I'm really starting to understand this more, get the hang of it more? Because if you're learning by being hands-on, and that's I'm a similar way. I like to call myself a practical learner. Like I have to, I've never been, and I think that was a reason why I didn't do so well at school. I can't do when you teach me, but but if you want to show me how to do it and I kind of replicate it and then add my own twist to it, and then I can find my own style. So when you're working with your short films, was there a project that you were on where you felt like, I'm finding my voice, I'm finding my style, I'm finally getting the hang of this stuff? Do you have any of those kind of eureka moments in your early
Yeah,
career?
I would say, and I don't know if you could see it's on my YouTube. It's a movie I made called Trap. I was
Hmm.
16 years old. It was 2003, and I got to use the camera I wanted to use on it, and I felt like I finally could understand it. But it was kind of sad that it took 8 years to get to that level, because it was just so much trial and error. Like I mean, I improved, but at like a snail's speed, it took a long time to get there. But yeah, I would say that's probably when I felt that eureka moment, because prior to that film, I felt like they were just very unwatchable, and like people just didn't really care. But I finally understood what people were looking for. And I finally understood, a great book I recommend, especially since your son wants to do it, is he should read a book called Save the Cat. I
Save the
think
cat.
that if I had read that earlier, I would have saved myself a long time in writing. It helps a lot about like just what it takes to write. What people want to see, what people want to see the characters change, and it's very important to have rich characters. And I actually, it's funny because I was working so hard on the technical, and then I realized the camera, the quality, it's a plus, but that's not what's going to make the good movie. In fact, you could get away with horrible footage, you can't get away with bad sound, and you can't get
Mm,
away with bad acting or bad writing.
mm, yeah.
So it was funny that I was aiming so high for the visual when in the end it was just superficial.
And I think a lot of that it goes back to some of the stuff that I do as well. Like something I had to learn is that I had to kind of find my own style. If my style wasn't as academic as other film critics, and if my style wasn't as, say, I don't know, humorous as other ones as well, but it's mine, and if you feel that in the content, then people will, respond to it because there's a authenticity to it. There's a uniqueness to it, which I think speaks to people because, like you said, and it's the same with like doing like stuff on YouTube, like a video or something. You can have the best cameras in the world and a setup and green screen and all that stuff, but if what you're talking about on screen isn't uh, engaging enough for people who want to watch, they don't really care what your setup looks like. They're more interested in what your words are and where you're coming from and what your opinion is. And I think it's something that I think a lot of people need to learn in regards to that. And I think it maybe comes back to that kind of practical effects, CGI effects conversation we're having before. Um, you know, the practical might not look realistic, but damn it, if I don't appreciate how it looks on screen anyway, because I know there's work being put into that. And I think that's a really
Yeah.
interesting way to look at it. Um, I got a saying in my household with my kids. It's practice is progress. Do you still feel like even though you've had all these short films under your belt and you've had all this, experience all the way back when you were like 9 years old and filming these puppet shows, that you're still practicing your craft, you're still progressing in your craft? Do you feel that there's no such thing as perfection, that we're always kind of like moving forward and learning new things with this, especially in regards to filmmaking? Is that something that is that a philosophy that you have in regards to your work?
Yes, because essentially you're never going to um, learn everything, and every project is different. No
Mm,
project is the same, and it's always like there always finds a way for a lesson to be learned. And ironically, when I first started out, I actually realized this the other day, is I went from doing a lot to actually doing less and learning
mm.
how to be more efficient. And that actually is the key. So it's like you end up thinking, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, but you actually, oh, maybe I did too much of that. I need to, and I would say that's important. But yeah, I would say you you always have to learn, and you always have to take a step back and reflect. I completely refuse with the idea that oh, I'm perfect, I got it, I got this, and I'm going to make things back to back. You definitely need a break, and you got to go back to life to find the next story you want to do.
You've talked about a couple of times now how important it is to live a life, to have experience. Um, Especially like we were talking before about Ridley Scott. I like to say to my kids, yeah, it's time to go outside and touch some grass,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to like, being stuck on devices and such, screen time and all that. It's like you got to touch grass. You got to be part of like, reality a little bit. It's clearly stuff that is very important to you, isn't it? Like to make sure that while you have a passion and you have a profession and you meld those two together, that not to live in that world for too long and to be able to, touch that grass and to feel the sun and to go out and experience and be with people. Because I imagine as a creative person, FC, that when you're around other people and it helps you better understand the psychology of not only who people are, but with the psychology of what stories people want to read and what movies they want to see as well.
Yeah, and also the fact that I see the same trap ever, so many of my filmmaker idols fell into, where they just it's like clockwork. Like in some ways they get better, and then in some ways they get worse. So and it's because that's why I always want to make sure that I leave a breadcrumbs on the ground so I know how to come back. Because if you don't come back, you end up just becoming this like you have a false reality in your head, and that's like when you're making um I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think sometimes people tend to be so enamored with the business side of things, and they see the world in an artificial way that it affects their work. Is that something that like you're referring to?
Yes, and also the fact that and just like an example, going back to M. Night Shyamalan, he used to let his mom edit his scripts, and then he
Mm.
stopped doing that because he thought that, oh, I got it from here. And I feel like that's sort of that not being able to, I guess, taming your ego. Let's put it that way,
Mm.
because ego is really the enemy here, and
Yeah.
it affects so many artists, and it's usually their downfall. And so perhaps that's what James Cameron does, is perhaps he escapes and does other things, so he doesn't let it doesn't affect his work, because every time he comes back, it's a huge success, right? You know?
Right, yeah, absolutely. I think what was it that they say in Scarface? Don't get high on your own supply, right?
Yeah, yeah. Don't eat the product. but that's but that but that's essentially what ends up happening. And I've seen not just filmmakers, just so many people get too stuck on themselves, and then they're even too afraid to publish something new. For example, the author for Game of Thrones, like
Mm,
he now has so much pressure that he's even scared to release something. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So, and that's kind of what ends up happening, is that I don't want to be think I don't I'm just a normal person, and I have to keep remembering that, because if you don't, life will teach you a lesson.
Exactly right. Um, I want to move on to a different game I play. It's called a rapid fire
Mhm.
questions. I'm going to throw some questions at you, and you're going to try to give me your answer as quick as you can. Then we can, talk a little bit more about them. Are you ready to play?
Yep.
Okay, so your movie, The Final Pact, is a supernatural movie, and one of the main characters per se is a very Mephisto-ish Satanist, satanic kind of devil-like character.
Hmm.
So what so far has been your favorite portrayal of the devil or like a Satan-like character that you've seen in a movie so far?
Constantine. um
Oh yeah, Peter Stormare.
yeah, I really
Mm.
liked it because I felt like it was, and it's going to sound strange, not because I know, but just it just felt like the most realistic, if that makes sense. Because there's the whole red horns and all the stuff. It just felt like it was more practical.
Mm.
So yeah, so I really enjoyed how they did that, and actually that was a big inspiration for this one, is how this was handled for the Final Pact.
Um, one of my favorites. I don't know if you ever seen the film, The Prophecy. It starred Christopher Walken, um, and Viggo Mortensen. He's in it. This movie was released in 1995, so this is before people knew who Viggo Mortensen, and he plays the devil in that. That's one of my favorites, I think. Have you seen The Prophecy?
I have not, unfortunately.
Oh, highly recommend if you want to watch a really good kind of like supernatural, religious horror kind of thing. And the amount of stars in this film, like lots 90s like era kind of stars in this film is fantastic. So I recommend that.
I'll
You
definitely check it
spoke
out. Yeah.
you spoke about M. Night Shyamalan a few times. What's your favorite M. Night Shyamalan film?
Signs, and that film actually changed all my films, because in a way I was very impressed with what he had done. He gave you the impression that he was making a movie about aliens, but it was not about that
Mm,
at all. And that
mm,
juxtaposition just, I don't know, changed me, because I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Like, I didn't know you could, because I was just impressed how he was able to, that movie was about a priest. And
mm.
I just really enjoyed that he was able to get away with that, and not have like people with pitchforks outside. It's like, hey, we went to see an alien movie, and it was just very cool. It was like, it was very layered, and I just didn't think you could get away with that. And then I'd say, of course, Sixth Sense, great film as
Mm.
well. I have to mention that. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Now, Signs is a great pick, and I think it's something that I definitely see in your movies, and I think I know what he means. Like the hook is the supernatural element or the sci-fi element or something, but the depth is the characters. In case of
Yeah.
that movie, it's the family, but it's a story about faith as well. I mean, that movie especially, like Mel Gibson's reverend. He's like a pastor, right? A reverend, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and he has a loss of faith there. There's like it all kind of ties together, and he's kind of like in his really kind of organic way. I really like the work done that, and I find that especially with your films, the last two films you did in The Waiting and the Final Pact. I feel that in your movies too, where you have the hook, like one's a ghost story, the other one's kind of like this, like almost kind of like Dante's Inferno, kind of like supernatural kind of story. But at the end, it's about the characters, and that's what comes down to at the end. It's about the characters and the stuff that they're going through. So I can see where that influence is. Um, Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes.
Ah, so you're one of the rare yeses on here. Explain yourself, please, FC.
I just enjoy the fact that there's, again, back to signs, that you can have two things on once, savory with sweet, So I mean, it's not that I have it every day, but I enjoy it. It's not the craziest thing. I mean, people people do stuff like that all the time. They mix sweet with savory. I think it works out fine. I don't get the hate, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, you're wrong. Okay, next one. Um, okay, this is a very controversial one, and we're in the festive season right now. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It can be. I don't know how to answer that. It can be. Yeah. I mean, I think watching it at Christmas, yeah, yeah,
So this is more of kind of like a dealer's preference kind of thing. Like if you want it to be a Christmas movie, you can have it be a Christmas movie kind of deal.
yeah. I mean, that's the great thing about movies, is they can be whatever you want them to be. And
Mm,
it's like, and that's what I like about films like that, is because a lot of films people forget this. It's like connected to your nostalgia, you know,
hmm
and a lot of people watch it at Christmas, and it's like, oh, so it's a Christmas movie. And that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate on there about the whole Die Hard is a Christmas movie thing. And so far, the answers I've got, more people have gone with the yes answer for whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. And I imagine a lot of people will be watching Die Hard. It always makes me kind of giggle a little bit actually when I think about people watching Die Hard on Christmas. But you know, what can you do? I want to talk about these new films that you got coming out soon. The Final Pact, which I have seen, the new arc I haven't seen yet. Um, the Final Pact's an incredibly interesting movie in that the premise of the film, for people who don't know, you have three priests almost finished with their training. I'm going to imagine, and I just wanted to clarify, Catholic, do you think is the religion that we're talking about here in the movie?
That was the direction we were going in. Yeah.
So yeah, the three Catholic priests are almost finished with their training to have one final test. And that final test kind of takes them down, kind of like this, like I said before, almost like these kind of Dante's Inferno, kind of different stages of temptations that have come across there. And then you've got the new arc, which I haven't seen yet, but looks incredibly interesting. And I think this is a movie that might tap into some stuff I haven't seen from you before. And it's got more of a kind of like a from the looks of it, more of a kind of sci-fi kind of vibe to it, almost kind of
Yep.
Stargatey. Is that kind of like where you're going with it on that one?
Oh yeah, it's all futuristic. All the sets were built, and it was a crazy idea. I can't believe we got away with it, to be honest. Because I basically took this is going to sound crazy, but I essentially just told myself, I'm going to pretend that I know how to do this when I don't know, and I'm going to learn it as I go. And I've never done that before, because usually, you want to make sure you do it. But I told all the actors the risks. Everyone knew, like, hey, this might not work out. Are you willing to try? And they said yes, and that's what we did. You know.
When it comes to the new arc, especially, your last three features were like more supernatural tales, but there was especially when it comes to waiting and the final pack. There's kind of like as a groundness to it as well. Like the characters are very much like in this world, even though they're dealing with things like supernatural kind of components in their lives. But the new arc is like, as you said before, very much kind of like a sci-fi kind of thing and such. When you dive into that kind of filmmaking, and you were talking before about you don't know whether it's going to work and different challenges and such. What's the biggest kind of challenge that you had? Is it trying to get concept from page to screen? Is that kind of like something that's really difficult in regards to especially any type of limitations of working on an independent production?
Well, there are three things. The first thing is something I call the indie curse, and the indie
Mm,
curse is basically when independent filmmakers, they can only get away with certain things, and like they can get away with filming at a location quickly before they come without asking for a permit, and but you get away
right.
with it because you don't it's not a special effect, you see it there, it's all there. The
Mm,
problem with sci-fi indie is that if you don't do it the right way, it looks like crap almost always. I
right.
mean, even if you go on TV and you watch those low budget, when I say low budget, I mean millions of dollars,
Right.
but not 300 million is what I mean, but it
Mm,
looks terrible. And so
right.
the challenging thing about this is how to make it look believable, because we had to like this was all filmed in a garage, and
Mm,
we would just switch the sets out, we would flip them around. It was it was absolutely crazy, and green screen the rest, and we tried to do as much practical as possible and to get away with it. So how do you make that look like how do you make something look like a $50 million movie without it costing $50 million? So I mean, it was just, I'm actually going to be releasing a behind the scenes video of that soon, so I'll send that to you if you want to share it or whatever. And you could
Mhm.
see how it would, but it was just a crazy. Basically, I wanted to grow faster. Let's put it that way, and see where I can go. As a filmmaker.
And when you're working on a new arc, did you find yourself flexing those invention muscles more
Oh yeah,
than with previous films?
yes. This one was I guess you could say, my most ambitious all around, and but like I said, it was just sort of how could I get away with it is what I kept trying to tell myself, because there was just so many challenges, and but it was interesting, and I really enjoyed doing that, and I now I feel more comfortable to try to do it again.
So you're going to be maybe dabbling into more kind of like high concept kind of like productions in the future, perhaps?
Yeah, in fact, my next film, Mr. Calculator, is kind of has high concepts. There's going to be a lot of crazy effects, but it's not in space or something. It's more into but it's going to be a hybrid, let's put it that way. But I wanted to, I didn't, it was Mr. Calculator was a script I've had for like 5 years now, but I just
Hmm.
didn't think I could get away with it. And now after the new arc, I feel more confident I could do it.
With the final pact and the new arc, so we're looking at, so we were talking off air before the final pact, we're looking around February, but the new
Yep.
arc probably more later next year. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Just because we're trying to get it to go through festivals first, and
Mhm.
that can take some time to get some, because once you finish the movie, once you finish filming, then you got to do post, and then you got to do mixing, and then you got to send it fast. So everything just takes a whole lot of time, you know. So yeah.
Um, so I just got to say, this has been an incredibly fascinating this conversation I'm having with you here, FC, because it just it's really remarkable to me, just in regards to your background and all the things that you've done. That you really are kind of like my favorite kind of creative in that you're willing to try new things, you're willing to learn new things as well. And on top of that as well, I love how incredibly accessible you are as well in regards to talking about your projects and talking about things going on, things you've done before. And I guess that at the end of the day, what it really comes down to that when you're in the indie world, and that's something I'm in as well as a reviewer and in YouTube kind of guy, podcaster, you really need to make sure that you're out there kind of putting your own, putting the word out, because I've always said to people, it's one thing to make a movie, it's another thing to like get it out there and have people know about it. Um, on that note, FC, these days there's it seems to me a lot of places where you can show movies, whether it be streaming and such. But because of that, it just seems like the amount of movies being made is just really expansive as well. Um, do you think that the additional options of watching the film, especially kind of like in streaming platforms, has made things easier for indie filmmakers like yourself? Or do you think because of these additional options, it's just opened the floodgates now where more people are trying to put their content out? I'm really curious about that.
I feel the pros and cons canceled each other out, so it's all about the same.
Mm,
That's what I feel. I feel that before it was difficult and now it's difficult. It's just that the challenges are changing, but you're still in this weird place where, okay, so where do I go now? And I one thing I want to say is I just wish there was more ways to be accessible to. So there's the indie world and the mainstream world, right? I wish
hmm
there were more doorways. For example, there's something called Tongle. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
So basically, it's very. I used to love that website. Basically, it was like they had this thing where they would make commercials, like they would offer it to filmmakers, and they would say, "Hey, if you can make a commercial, we'll buy it from you." And so there was always something called a wild card entry, and they would give me no budget. They're like, "Okay, if you want to try to submit, go ahead," and I would do it, and I would constantly win in that wild card. So, and then my commercial would be in the Super Bowl or whatever. Like it would just be like they would use it, and and that would be so fun to do. And I really wish studios and places like that would have some pathway that they at least give someone a chance so they can at least see that, hey, maybe there's something there. That's what I think, because there's a lot of talent that give up because there's just no way to go, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is needed. And that hasn't changed. And it's just because now there's a lot of, just because there's a lot of content doesn't mean it's good, you know?
Yeah, exactly right. There was something I was speaking to someone not long ago. Just it seems to me that more than ever, I think people have a lot of kind of like IP burnout in regards to like movies, especially movies on the big screen. And what I'm hoping for maybe is that maybe perhaps more independent voices will get a chance to have their stuff shown in cinemas more. Because when it's independent voice, I think there's an authenticity there that people are probably looking for. I don't know, but I mean, you're the one who's you've spoken before about psychology in regards to what people want. What do you think is it that people do want when they go to the cinema to pay for their movie ticket? Are they looking just for something safe, or are they looking for something authentic? Which one do you think is wins out in the end?
Well, unfortunately, the issue is that there's three different types of audiences. There are the ones that are looking for something new, that are going to go to those indie films, but unfortunately, the majority gets Spider-Man 37 made. And the reason
Mm,
is because people understand is that Hollywood didn't run out of ideas, guys. Hollywood has the ideas. Is that the Hollywood ran out of balls.
mm.
They don't want to take risks anymore. They want to know that you're coming for sure, and people vote with their money. And that's what happens is if they know for sure the next Spider-Man is going to get $1 billion or $2 billion, of course they're going to invest in that and not something new. And so that's why you have less new movies now. And so really it's the audience is to blame. The audience has to go out and try to watch new things to make the next Spider-Man, to make the next Star Wars, to make, you know, I don't think Star Wars would be successful today if it came out today, because
Mm.
people only like what they know. And unfortunately that's the case. But there are audiences, of course, who love indie films, who do want to try, but people need to really be more brave to try new things. Maybe, yeah, maybe most of it's not going to be good, but you have to try to, get new content.
Well, I know that we can always rely on UFC to have new content out there for us to watch. I know you're incredibly prolific, but the quality is always there as well. It's that kind of rare kind of like combination where there's a constant stream of movie to be watched in FC Rabbath production, but I know when I'm going to watch it that it's in the hands of a good filmmaker who put his time and his effort into creating incredibly good product. And for everyone out there listening, I'm going to put all the links for FC's socials and website in the production notes at the bottom, so you can check out his stuff. And FC, any news comes up in regards to release dates for the final pact, or any news coming up for the new arc in regards to trailers or festival appearances, let me know so I can always update that on my end, because I am an advocate of your work and it's been so great to be able to talk to you today, and I can't wait to see what the new arc looks like. It sounds incredibly fascinating.
Thank you. And I just want to say that I appreciate you, and I really hope other places start appreciating critics more who are doing a really good job and trying to get people out there. And it's just a shame that there's more elitism, let's put it that way, on who gets in and who isn't. And this sort of thing is what really kills. It's that greed, and I wish there was more harmony, let's put it that way.
Yes, me too. Well, you and I just have to keep putting in the work, and hopefully that harmony will start to be found out there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matthew.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.